a political debate that went awry, false reports of his firing that spread like wildfire, and a chaotic on-air moment during wildfire coverage have all put David Muir at the center of an unexpected media storm. Critics accuse him of putting appearance before substance, while insiders say it's classic. David Muir has long been a symbol of trust and authority in the world of television journalism. He is a sharp dresser, with a commanding presence and a voice that viewers rely on. What was once dismissed as background noise is now making waves at ABC, and possibly eroding Muir's own confidence due to his behavior. What really happened behind the scenes? And is this the unraveling of one of network news' most recognizable figures? The answers might surprise you. You see, David Muir didn't just wake up one day and become one of the most trusted faces on TV. His journey also began with another journalist. People who knew David back then weren't surprised that he ended up anchoring World News Tonight. He was that kid who didn't just talk about what he wanted to be, he actually did it. Every Halloween, when other kids dressed up as superheroes or monsters, David went as a news reporter, complete with trench coat and notepad. He wasn't just acting, he meant it. He would tell his friends he was going to be that person. When the news came on, David, the next big name in the news, would drop everything and run inside. While other kids spent their afternoons playing ball or riding bikes, he couldn't afford to miss it. To him, it wasn't just a program. It was preparation for the life he was already starting to pursue. By 6th grade, he was already contacting experts to try to figure out how to break in. He wrote a letter to Ron Curtis, a local anchor in Syracuse. Shortly after David's death, Curtis wrote back, and that letter ignited a fire within of him. Showed up at the WTVH station, where Curtis worked, and asked if he could help in any way. He didn't care what he did. He carried tripods, tore scripts, recorded interviews, and even got soda for the anchors. He loved every minute of it. The newsroom became like a second home to him, and he spent so much time there during the summer and school breaks that the staff started writing his height on the wall and making jokes about how deep his even in high school. He was already doing interviews on camera, braces, 90s haircut and all. His parents had a lot to do with that. They didn't always feel like driving him back and forth to the station, but they did it anyway. Summer breaks, holidays, and any free time David had were all spent in that newsroom. His parents may have been exhausted, but they never let him miss an opportunity. For a young person who aspired to travel the world as a journalist, studying abroad in Spain at Ithaca College was a dream come true. He lived with a Spanish family, attended classes in a new language, and soaked up every experience. Every dinner became a discussion about politics, culture, and life. He didn't realize it at the time, but it was the same thing he would be doing on air one day, connecting with people, asking questions, and sharing stories. After 5 years in his hometown, it was time for the next step. Boston came calling. A major market with a higher level of scrutiny and expectation. Muir was ready. He returned to Syracuse and landed his first job at the same station, where he used to volunteer. That time in Spain stuck with him, because it gave him a new lens through which to view the world. And when he returned, he was more focused than ever. When Muir was hired by ABC News in 2003, the relentless pace paid off. He started by anchoring World News Now, the network's overnight broadcast that reached both early risers and night owls. The audience there demanded more than just headlines. They expected depth, accuracy, and relevance on everything from politics and sports to snowstorms and City Hall controversies. Every story carried weight, and Muir made sure he was prepared to meet that challenge. Muir was rapidly becoming a lead correspondent who was sent all over the world whenever big news broke. Shortly after joining ABC, he volunteered to host the weekend edition of World News Tonight, which was hosted by Diane Sawyer, whom Muir had long admired. Anchoring the weekend slot meant more than just sitting in a chair. It meant stepping into a legacy, which he understood and respected. As time passed, Muir's name began to appear more frequently, and by 2009 even TMZ had taken notice, calling him the Brad Pitt of news. Anchor's an unexpected title that showed how visible he was becoming. And in 2012, he got one of his biggest breaks yet, leading coverage of the presidential election. He wasn't just a face on screen, he was asking tough, real questions. When Mitt Romney was in the spotlight, Muir pressed him on his tax returns, and he didn't let up. That's what got people to stop and pay attention. But none of this came easily. He didn't just happen to be in the spotlight. He sacrificed a lot. He worked almost every day of the week, not because anyone asked him to, but because the news meant so much to him. He truly loved the chase, the storytelling, and the responsibility. And this wasn't a studio-only job. Muir was out in the field, walking straight into places that most people tried to avoid. In 2013, he was in Tehran, right on the ground, to see how U.S. sanctions were affecting ordinary people in Iran. That kind of reporting didn't happen behind a desk. He continued to anchor the weekend broadcasts, and the impact was evident in the ratings. Viewers were drawn in by the way he brought distant headlines to life. He reported from Somalia, where he became the first American news anchor to cover the famine in Mogadishu, from Japan after the devastating tsunami, and from Cairo during the Tahrir Square uprising. That assignment turned dangerous, as he and his crew were shot at while documenting aid efforts. In Somalia, he saw refugee camps so packed that new arrivals had nowhere to go. He later talked about the heartbreak he experienced while watching unspeakable suffering unfold, while the rest of the world continued. The rise of America's anchor. In 2014, David Muir finally achieved the goal he had been pursuing since he was a child. He became the anchor of World News Tonight. It was a momentous occasion that most people can only imagine. He took the seat Diane Sawyer had previously occupied, and the timing was the decision to make Muir the face of ABC's nightly news wasn't the result of a protracted debate. According to James Goldston, the person in charge there, Muir had been preparing for this moment for years. To them, it just made sense, and it paid off. Not even a year into his run, the numbers started climbing quickly. That same year, Sawyer lost her husband, legendary film director Mike Nichols. Meanwhile, Muir was already well known due to the 2020s, and he was now taking on the biggest role of his career, surpassed the competition, and became the most watched evening news program in America. But Muir was wise enough to avoid becoming overconfident. The rivalry between ABC, NBC, and CBS never subsided, and he acknowledged that the pressure was real and that it affected him. Despite this, everyone at ABC seemed to believe he was built to last. And as the 2016 election approached, his interviews started to receive a lot of attention. One particularly noteworthy instance was his interview with Hillary Clinton, in which he confronted her about using a private email server. While the clip went viral and became one of the most replayed and defining moments of the campaign. Then came the other side of the story. After Donald Trump won, Muir landed the first post-inauguration interview, which turned out to be explosive. Trump talked about bringing back waterboarding, walked back his promise that Mexico would pay for the wall, and insisted despite all of this. The exchange was crucial, as it was her first notable instance of public accountability. Proof that the largest crowd in history attended his inauguration. It was the type of interview where you didn't just hear the news, but witnessed its impact in real time. And like everyone else in the media, Muir had to change course when COVID-19 struck. The newsroom changed overnight, with many anchors starting to broadcast from home. And Muir was prepared with a full setup in his West Village home, but he still made the decision to show up at the studio most days, even though the building was almost empty. As long as when the pandemic struck, a disproportionately high number of Americans started using the evening news again. Reports show that World News Tonight and NBC Nightly News were virtually tied, each attracting about 12 million viewers. This was the highest viewership in 20 years. The last time World News Tonight achieved such high numbers was in 2000. With more eyes on him than ever before, Muir felt the weight of the moment. He realized that people were afraid. There is always drama in a newsroom, but the tension that is building between George Stephanopoulos and David Muir feels more like a slow-burning TV series than your typical workplace rivalry. He was dealing with a public health crisis, an unstable economy, and serious questions about leadership. Although he wasn't a doctor or a politician, he felt that his job had meaning, and that every night he felt that his role was to help people make sense of the chaos, and maybe feel a little less alone in it. The tension dates back years. When Diane Sawyer left World News Tonight, which is the crown jewel of the evening lineup for anyone in TV news, George had secretly hoped it was his turn. He was already holding down Good Morning America, but the evening news gig that had been his since the late 90s had held the title of chief anchor since 2014. However, over time, David Muir, younger, camera-ready, and rising fast, started inching into that territory. And George wasn't too happy about it. Was the one he truly desired. The issue was that mornings were becoming much more valuable to networks, and George was a major factor in this. As a result, ABC gave him the morning slot instead of moving him to the evening one. But to keep George happy, they gave him a consolation prize that included special reports and political coverage. Given his extensive background, particularly his time in the Clinton White House. It made sense. And that's how the chief anchor title was created basically. It was made just for him. Their lane. But inside ABC News, people realized that George and David weren't exactly having lunch together. Tension increased. And as David's profile rose, so did the viewership of David's World News Tonight. Meanwhile, George continued to shine during election nights and significant political events. Gradually, however, David started receiving more high-profile coverage, particularly during breaking news. How that shift occurred depends on who is reporting the story. Some claim David detested it. In any case, a long-term contract was discreetly signed, and Muir became more than just the evening anchor. He became the face of ABC News. To be fair, ABC leadership tried to maintain equilibrium, asking David to be patient, and assuring George that he was still in charge of the major event coverage, at least through the 2020 election. George agreed to this, even agreeing to let go of the chief anchor. Others claim that he sat on the bench all day waiting for his 6:30 slot and pushed hard to get more airtime. However, he also believed that no one else would take over. That's where things got complicated because, despite David never having been officially appointed chief anchor, he was suddenly performing all of the duties that the chief anchor was expected to perform. George felt betrayed by the man who had made that promise. ABC News president James Goldston was still in place, but his influence was short-lived after the network fired his longtime lieutenant, Barbara Feda, after an internal investigation into racially offensive remarks. George wasn't going to let it go when things at ABC started to fall apart. He went straight to the top, past Goldston, past middle management, and all the way to Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney. George and Iger had known each other for years, and when they sat down, it became evident that this wasn't just about titles or airtime, but also about respect. There were even rumors that George might leave ABC and join a rival network, but Disney rolled out the red carpet to keep George on board. Iger personally met with George and offered him his own production, business that he and his wife, Allie Wentworth, could run together. They would develop projects for Hulu and National Geographic, while Muir would continue to handle special reports, and George would stick to breaking news and Good Morning America. This would be a sort of truce, but behind the scenes, the rivalry had not subsided. One tabloid even claimed that George was irritated by David's dressing room size and had begun asking. It was difficult to feel sorry for either of them in the court of public opinion. Muir reportedly earns at least $5 million annually, while George brings in 3 times that. Despite this, they were caught in a battle over job titles, airtime, and dressing rooms, while many employees in that same newsroom are barely making ends meet on $30,000 salaries. His team asked what benefits David was receiving to make sure he wasn't missing out. Indeed, a truce seemed to have been reached, but in a place like ABC News, where reputations are worth a lot and every camera angle matters, that kind of peace is always fleeting. David Muir's reputation was under attack in September 2024. He had just assisted in moderating a debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris when ABC called for a live fact-check of the candidates. While some viewers appreciated the accountability, others, particularly Trump supporters, felt it went too far. Following CNN's hosting of the first debate in June 2024, without any live fact-checking, which only served to fuel the fire, they accused Muir of trying to tip the scales. Trump himself blasted the moderators, saying ABC was dishonest and the entire debate was rigged. He even suggested that they should lose their license. When asked about it later, he called it noise, saying that it was just people looking for something to be angry about. But the drama didn't end there. Shortly after the ABC debate, a fake story went viral on the internet that claimed Muir and co-moderator Lindsay Davis had been fired. The rumor began on a satirical website, but people took it seriously once it spread on social media, forcing ABC to publicly clarify that they hadn't been fired. Then, in 2025, some of the worst wildfires Los Angeles had seen in years arrived, and Muir and the ABC crew hurried to the scene to report live. While standing in the midst of the destruction, wearing a yellow fireproof jacket with the ABC News logo, viewers' attention was drawn to the back of his jacket rather than the flames. When Muir turned around on camera, they saw that his coat appeared to be being tightened with clothespins to make it fit better. The internet erupted, with some viewers accusing him of being conceited for worrying about his appearance during a tragedy. One person even likened him to a fashion model as the city burned, and the joke began. The sharpest jab came from Megyn Kelly, who criticized Muir on her show, saying it looked childish like dress-up during a crisis, and that it was disrespectful to people who were suffering. Behind the scenes, things weren't any quieter. Someone even altered a picture of Derek Zoolander with Muir's face. Even Jack Osborne chimed in, mockingly applauding his choice of attire during a disaster. ABC eventually pushed back, claiming that Muir wasn't focused on appearances, but rather on the fires and the people affected. One insider called it classic Muir, citing his reputation for being obsessed with how he looks on camera. They said that while he's a good journalist, he's also the type of guy who's always posting tight shirt shots and selfies on Instagram. They also joked that Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo might also enjoy a tight fit, but even they wouldn't pull a clothespin stunt in a disaster zone. Came to his defense as well. One fan said that the pins were likely there to prevent the jacket from flapping in the strong wind, which could have destroyed the sound. Another said that the clips might have been holding the microphone wire in place, which would make sense given the chaos on the ground. Finally, some fans just thought he looked good. Amy Robach and TJ Holmes discussed the incident on their podcast, and Robach admitted that she had gone through similar wardrobe adjustments in the studio, but never in the field. Given that stylists frequently make last-minute changes without the anchor's knowledge, Holmes hypothesized that Muir might not have even been aware of the jacket fix. This was supported by a source who told WWD that the fix happened about 30 seconds before airtime. As the wind picked up, a producer quickly decided to secure the jacket, while Muir was concentrating on his notes and getting ready to go live. He had not asked for any special treatment from ABC, and they stuck by him, reminding everyone that Muir was standing in the middle of an emergency zone encircled by smoke, ash, and people who had lost everything. They claimed that his attention was on the firefighters and the victims rather than fashion. But the picture stuck, and it wasn't the first time that Muir's appearance showed up in the story. Some insiders had already expressed concern about his Instagram posts while he was on assignment, saying that he appeared more interested in posing than reporting. One source even compared him to Zoolander and Anchorman, saying that he was more interested in lighting than headlines. Muir shared a picture from a high-stakes reporting assignment in Israel in October 2023, wearing a helmet, a protective vest, and his signature-fitted black shirt. The picture immediately focused more on his body than the seriousness of the situation, and his posts about the gym only served to reinforce the conservative perception. Commentator Andrea Tantaros once said that because he spent more time flexing in the mirror than lifting weights, other gym patrons called him Zoolander. She even made a joke about his preference for jazzercise. To be fair, Muir has never pretended not to care about his appearance. He once told Vanity Fair that he knows he has a photo face, and is very aware of how his head looks in pictures. It's part of the job when you're always on camera. Perhaps the clothespin incident was just a harmless wardrobe fix that went too far. If someone is going to be dragged for trying to look decent while standing in an evacuation, then perhaps the comment was meant as a jab. Zone at least it's someone who is truly out there working, not just watching from a studio with flawless lighting and no smoke in sight. David Muir's secret second life. David Muir is one of those well-known, dependable faces in American journalism. He consistently shows up on ABC News with a polished, approachable, and captivating demeanor. But even though the public knows David Muir as a journalist, his personal life has always been a mystery. Mystery that leaves people wondering, particularly about his dating life. For years, fans have questioned whether he is married or dating someone, and how a well-known man can manage to remain so private. The truth is that Muir has done a good job of hiding that aspect of himself, but that hasn't stopped the rumors from spreading. Take Kelly Ripa, for instance. Their friendship has sparked a lot of lighthearted speculation. It all began with a message. She chose to shoot her after seeing him report on TV. Then there was the commotion back in 2015 about Muir and Gio Benitez. At the time, they were hanging out a lot and posting pictures together, and fans were quick to connect. That one message started a friendship that has lasted for years. They've gone on vacations together, frequently with Riapa's husband Mark Consuelos. Although people occasionally joke about something more between them, it's clear that they're just close friends. The rumors were put to rest when Benitez married Tommy Daddario in a private ceremony later that year. Despite everything, he and Muir remained close professionally and kept things moving. They never discussed the rumors, and perhaps that was the best course of action. At the same time, a writer named Kate Dre stirred things up with an article in which she casually claimed she was dating Muir. She even claimed to have taken some of the photos he posted online, which undoubtedly raised eyebrows. But Muir refused to acknowledge it, and as a result, Fans were left wondering if there was ever anything genuine between them, or if it was just a clever headline. Then, in 2022, Sean, the founder of the swimwear company Aussie Bum, entered the rumor mill. Some outlets began tying Muir to him, implying that they were more than just acquaintances. But, like the rumors before, there was no concrete evidence, just hunches and online speculation. As someone who spends so much time in front of the camera, Muir is extremely skilled at keeping his private life out of the public eye. However, one thing that has remained constant throughout all of this is that he has never spoken about his sexuality, confirmed a relationship, or allowed anyone into that part of his life. What is evident, though, is that he is not lacking in love. He is constantly talking about his family, especially his nieces and nephews. He is the kind of uncle who shows up with loud applause and posts the most proud captions. He joked with 3 of his nieces about having to see the 4th the next time in one post, and he also called himself a proud uncle when he congratulated one of them on graduating. He is obviously close to his sister as well, sharing birthday toasts and inside jokes that suggest a close bond. And then there is Axel, his dog. If there is one thing that people know about Muir's personal life, it's this puppy. Axel appears to be a big part of the anchor's world, whether he is side-eyeing Muir for work on the weekends or just relaxing as if he owns the place. Muir has even acknowledged that he arranges his schedule around his dog, much like a parent would with a child. What is actually going on with David Muir's love life, which is kept under wraps? But from the outside, it appears that he has created a life full of close relationships, deep loyalty, and plenty of love, even if it isn't the romantic kind. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, comment, and enable post alerts so that you can see our most recent material.